Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fund Your Passion podcast. We are on episode 12. Can you believe it, Darren? I'm delighted that you're joining me. I know you're feeling a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to do my best to stay chirpy and cheerful.
Yes, Amanda, I'm relying on you to carry me through the show. Feeling a little bit hoarse today, but fortunately the PCR was negative, and hopefully the family and I will be off to Dubai. So to check out the JBR of Dubai, because as we know in Dubai, JBR is the area where all the supercars go. So that's not actually why we chose the name JBR for the business, but is a remarkable coincidence.
It's a remarkable coincidence. I trust you're not just going to be working there. Are you going to be doing anything recreational? There is a great water park. I have a story which I will share offline.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Apparently we're going on camels in the sand dunes. Can't wait for that. But I think I'm going to get one of those car things across the dunes. That looks like a lot of fun.
Oh, the buggying.
Yeah, the buggy thing. That's it. Yeah.
Right,
so I don't know if anyone's done that out there, but we're going to give that a go.
Only driving.
Our guests are nodding. I better introduce them so that we know who we're talking to. I'm delighted that in this episode we're talking all things Intercooler, and joining me are the journalists Andrew Frankel. Andrew, brilliant to see you. Obviously, you've been hacking, let's say, for many years, and Dan, lovely to have you with us as well. Another seasoned veteran, not just as a journalist but also podcasting. So in actual fact, Darren, you are in safe hands because yeah, these guys are pros.
Well, they're pro, you're pro, and I'm just the bluffer amateur. But we're doing okay.
We're doing fine.
I'm feeling the pressure now.
Come on,
I have to sit up and pay attention.
Well, both of you were nodding. I mean, obviously, we have got the benefit of being on Zoom, so I can look at all your lovely faces. You guys were both nodding when Darren was talking about going buggying across dunes. Have you both done that before?
Yeah, but only driving the buggy. I wouldn't want to be a passenger in one of them for anything.
Why?
That's good advice. I'm going to do that.
Well, because when you go up the side of a dune, you never know what's on the other side of it.
Oh, good point.
And it's bad enough if you're driving it. But well, I've never been a passenger in one, but I'm a terrible passenger at the best of times. And the idea of sort of going over the top, not knowing what's on the other side, and whatever happening then being somebody else's fault is just not something I'd want to countenance, really.
Well, you need to do what I did, which is be a passenger in the Brabham BT62 going round the track driven by David Brabham himself. And
I had that opportunity as well. And I didn't do that either.
Let's put it straight. Fantastic, but I was delighted when it was over. No disrespect to David, but my stomach was in my head. It was horrific.
Dan, have you done much track driving or passenger driving on a track?
Yeah, plenty of driving and bits and pieces as a passenger. I'm like Andrew. I hate it.
Yeah.
Terrible passenger. Although better on track than on the road. If I'm sat with someone driving quickly on the road, I'm just looking at every tree thinking, we'll hit that one. We'll hit that one.
Does it make a difference who you're driving with?
Dan's been a co-driver.
Oh, I have done a bit of co-driving, and I'll never do it again. It was awful.
Is that like when you're a driving instructor and you've got the extra set of pedals?
I wish. I just had the clutch in the whole time,
Yeah.
so we couldn't go anywhere. No, I was terrible at it. I'm such a poor passenger that that's the amazing thing about rally co-drivers is that somehow they switch off that component in their mind and do the job, whereas I couldn't switch off that component, so I couldn't do the job. I was hopeless.
Do you think this is part of being an automotive journalist, hack, expert, test driver, racer, whatever we're going to call ourselves here? We hate being passengers.
I think most of us
do something in it. We'd rather be in control.
Yeah.
Chris Harris, for instance, is a very good passenger, which I've never really understood. And he sat next to me and we've been doing all sorts of really stupid stuff. And he tends to sort of sit there with a little smile on his face and not sort of start shrieking or grabbing things or.
Maybe that's a lack of imagination on his part.
I don't know what it is. I mean, we as you'll know, man, we go on car launches all the time. We always have to pair up with someone. And literally the first thing I do when the invitation comes in, and I think to myself, well, I'm going to go and do this, I ring up whoever is hosting this thing and saying who else is going. And if I can't find someone who I kind of think I might trust to drive with, I'll probably think of an excuse not to go, because you know the way cars are these days, they are so powerful. You know, a lot of the stuff we drive are completely outgrown the environments in which we get to drive them. And the idea of, you know, honking down the side of some Italian mountain in something with 900 horsepower with an idiot driving it. I mean, I've got to the stage in my life where I don't need to do it. So I don't.
Oh, go on. You're going to have to just give us, and can you tell us a car launch or a name even of somebody who has
No,
given?
I mean, the most frightened I've ever been on a car launch actually was in a Ford KA, a thing called a street car, which they launched in the south of France, I don't know, 20 years ago. And there was an American driving it. No offense to American drivers, he just happened to be American. And I knew I was in trouble when he got in the driver's seat and put on a baseball cap backwards, which he got out of his Ferrari livery Polo, and then decided to drive this thing. And I can remember we came onto a straight, and he decided to overtake the car in front and missed the 40 cyclists coming up the same straight. And if there hadn't been a huge lay-by to one side in which all 40 cyclists disappeared to save their own lives, that would have been yeah.
Wow.
And it's pretty much the only time I've ever got on top of my sort of British Reserve and just said stop. You know, either I'm driving or I'm walking back. But yeah, no, I'm not very good at that, I'm afraid.
Well, we could talk about being passengers and car launches and exciting things like that for hours and hours on end, but I'm conscious that we're actually here to talk about Intercooler.
Yeah.
Now, this is a digital car magazine. Is that how you describe it?
Dan, over to you. It was your idea.
Yeah, I think Digital Car Magazine almost covers it, but actually it's more than that. You know, we do lots across social media. We have our podcast as well. We do video, so it's, you know, if you're digital, you're not just written word, are you? These days,
No.
you cover everything. So yeah, I mean, we launched as an app 10 months ago or something, maybe 9 months ago, and soon we'll be launching our website as well. So we're continuing to evolve this thing. But the key thing about it is that there are no ads and it's subscription only. So it's actually the only digital car magazine of its type. And we've had a great response, haven't we, Andrew? I mean, people, they seem to get what it is that we do, throwing the emphasis on quality rather than quantity, rather than just reporting on the latest stuff that's going on in the industry, driving the newest cars. We try and tell people things that they didn't know before, and it seems to work.
And do you find having the platform of obviously, as you say, this is a digital platform that you're actually working on as opposed to hard print, do you feel that offers you more opportunities?
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
does, Andrew.
It certainly does. I mean, we now have, you know, we now exist in 4 different places. We have the podcast, we have the Instagram, we've got the app, and soon we'll have the website. Also, it gives us an awful lot of resilience. I mean, you know, there have been, you know, 4 print publications that I used to work for regularly, which in the last year have ceased to exist. And, you know, that saddens me, because actually, you know, I love print, and I always will. And I look at magazines like Road Rat and Magneto, and I love reading them, and I always will. But by doing, but you know, their problem is that, you know, as we know, there's been a bit of a chip crisis. Cars aren't being sold. And when cars don't get sold, you know, car manufacturers don't advertise. And so many publications these days are so dependent on advertising, both for their revenues and for their content. And we just decided a long time ago we weren't going to play that game. You know, we partner up with, you know, key people who feel the same way we do, like JBR, for instance, and a few others. But other than that, you know, that you won't find any banners or, you know, pop-ups or clickbait or anything like that on our site. What we do instead, what the idea is that we would provide motoring journalism of the kind of quality you'd hope to find in the quarterly print publication, but we do it every day. And so every single day you go on the app and there's a new story written by Henry Catchpole or Karen Chandok or, you know, Andrew English, Peter Robinson. I mean, we have an incredible bunch of contributors, you know, what we regard as the best bunch of motoring journalists working under one roof, probably anywhere in the world, if that's not too arrogant a thing to say. And one or other of us will write something new for the app every single day. And so, you know, wake up 7 o'clock in the morning, go on there, and there will be another considered, thoughtful story on there, which, as Dan says, we hope will tell you something you didn't already know. It won't be, you know, a review of the latest, you know, plug-in crossover SUV, you know, fall asleep, yawn, you know, not interested. So that's the idea behind it.
I was just about that. I mean, there's a whole topic of conversation about sort of new cars. Obviously, you know, you've got such established history. I'm beginning to get the picture of what you think, Andrew, of the latest plug-in electric.
Well,
Maybe I shall be diverting those questions towards Dan.
didn't seem so enthusiastic, but anyway.
They're not
I mean,
thrilling, are they?
About
well,
as enthusiastic as I am about EVs in, you know, the high-end supercar market. But anyway, that's,
okay. Well, I'm going to wave the flag then for them because I like it. But anyway, we'll get onto that a little bit later. But in all seriousness, I mean, the Intercooler has just gone from strength to strength, and you must be tremendously proud of what you've managed to achieve in such a short space of time.
Yeah, what makes me proud actually is, well, A, that we've built this amazing team of writers, contributors who want to be involved. And actually, they're not just established car journalists. We've got designers and engineers, people from outside our core industry writing for us and writing brilliant stuff for us. But I'm also proud that people seem to be enjoying it. You know, our subscribers get what it is that we want to do. So it does feel like we found this little niche and we've sort of nestled into it quite comfortably. We've got an awful lot of work to do to really establish this as a business. But, you know, we've got a brilliant partner in the sort of business brains behind it who's backing us brilliantly. And so I think what we have actually is an opportunity to really build something. And with partners like JBR, you know, it just gives us more and more opportunity to build an audience, to keep producing great stuff. And I'm just absolutely convinced that we've got something here. You know, we just need to keep going, keep iterating, keep improving it. And I think we'll look back a few years from now and go, it was exactly the right move.
I've got a question for you. Maybe I'm just being stupid, but when you open a magazine and you buy it off the shelf, you know, for me, first and foremost, I'm looking at all the wonderful photography and all the pictures. It's very, very eye-catching. And then I kind of get to the detail of the text of the article and get into that. Does that hold true when it's online on Intercooler? Are people coming to you to look at pictures, the photography as well as the writing, or is it more about the fact that you are incredible writers and basically the best in class of the sector? What's your views?
I think that, you know, there are lots and lots of places you can go, you know, not least Instagram, to find, you know, beautiful pictures of cars. You know, the imagery is important to us, but we're not primarily a photographic resource. If we're going to spend money on photography, we'll tend to spend it on archive stuff. If we got some story about some great old racing driver or something like that, then you know, and there's wonderful photography and, you know, all the archives that we can go and get that from. But, you know, if you think about the print products that really specialize in the writing, you think of things like, you know, The Economist or The New Yorker, or The Week or Private. I mean, you know, like us, they are not heavy, big on photographs. I think when the website comes along, that will give us a bigger and better opportunity to do more in that sort of direction. But we are at the moment primarily about the quality of our writing. And yeah, we would always hope that the photography that we use is up to that standard, but it's not what we're here for.
Do you think this is a generational thing as well? So, I mean, the younger generation and sort of
What are
more
you
of the
trying to
people. Well, okay, what I'm trying to say, I am not a big fan of magazines, in that I like to look at them, but then once I've looked at them, to me, they're then obsolete. The idea of keeping them and referring back to them is actually something I would never do. Because I think I've got a beautiful, massive, great big Apple screen in front of me, and it looks so much better when it's on there, this photograph or this article, rather than me reading it in an actual physical magazine. That's just my preference. But I'm just wondering if this is a generational thing now, that people are actually turning to their computers, tablets, mobile phones, whatever, and that's where they're actually seeking to find information rather than picking up a magazine. Is that what you're finding?
I think that's happening, and I think if you look at the macro trends, if you sort of accelerate down the road 10 years, 20 years, it's only going to be more so. Particularly young kids now, they're not picking up magazines, and when they're adults, they won't pick up that as a habit. I understand why people really have a thing for print. I can't remember the last time I sat down with a paper product, even a book. I use a Kindle. And if I'm reading a magazine, it's probably on an iPad or something. So I just think the trend is going that way, and I'd rather be swimming with the tide rather than against it. But yeah, I mean, there are great opportunities on like you say, if you've got a big, beautiful screen in front of you, you can render a gorgeous image on that, and far bigger than you ever could in a magazine, and it's going to look fantastic. So yeah, definitely with digital, you've got all these opportunities, and I just think it's future-proofed as well.
I think it's a good point about the archiving. Sorry, Andrew. I think it's a great point on the archiving stuff, because in our office we've got rows and rows of shelves with magazines galore, books galore, and no one ever takes them off the shelf once they've read them the first time. So at least in digital, it's there forever in an archived way you can access. That's all I was going to say, Andrew, but over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will always be. It's like sort of vinyl, isn't it? Everybody thought that was dead, and surprise, surprise, it's not. I think there will always be a constituency. Things that don't tend to die out. I mean, horses didn't die out when cars came along. They just got used for a different purpose. And I think that there will always be print magazines, but they'll be very small. They'll be very expensive. And I think Road Rat and Magneto have got the right idea, where they have a big cover price. They don't come out very often, so they don't take up a huge amount of space, but they're absolutely top quality and worth waiting for when you get there. And I think that's the way that it's going to go. But for us, we are so we're only just through the entry door in terms of what we want this business to do, and we have got so much stuff that we have to accomplish before we ever thought about going down a road like that. And also, others do it terribly well. And I just really like the idea, and particularly when the website comes along, we've already got hundreds of stories written by the best writers, and they're on the app, but you've got to go looking for them, and you've got to know they're there. Once we have the website, it's just going to be fantastic, and people are literally every day going to be able to dive into hundreds of stories written by the best motoring journalists in the world, and they'll just be sitting there in front of them. And I find that, just as a consumer of motoring journalism, I find that immensely exciting, because it's not happening anywhere else.
Yeah, if you subscribe to us, you immediately have access to everything we've ever done. If you subscribe to a magazine, they don't send you every back copy, do they?
Yeah, no, exactly. So how do you both go about editing this then? If you've obviously got this great big group of contributors, how are you actually controlling what goes out? Who's ultimate? 3
Dan
words.
does it.
Well, I literally do it, upload it to the CMS and so on. But the sort of ideation thing, we just lean on our contributors. We'll have conversations with them, find out what they've been up to, what's on their minds at the moment, and we trust them. But there's no particular strategy actually. It's a lot. It's very seat of the pants, what feels right. And as you do it more and more, you have more and more of an understanding of what it is that works.
And you're back to being the passenger in the car, because you're trusting their driving, and their driving is writing the content.
The consequences aren't so grave, are they, I suppose?
That's true.
I think there is an important point here, which is another reason which I hope to think we are different. One of the key things that I was always very keen on, only because it's what I grew up. I grew up on Car Magazine in the late 70s and early 80s.
You've got this behind you, I can see.
Oh, yeah, 1 or 2. Yeah. But I didn't actually read Car Magazine for the articles. I read them for the people who are writing them. I read them for Leonard Setright and George Bishop and and Mel Nichols and Steady Barker and Phil Llewellyn and guys like that. And that's what we hope we're already doing, that because people know who write for us, they'll just kind of think, well, I'm really interested in what Andrew English has got to say, or what Henry Catpol's got to say today, because they're such big names and they're so highly respected. And these guys could talk about, I don't know, tiddlywinks or budgerigars, and hopefully they do so in an interesting way, that people will come to us not just for our stories, but for the people who write them. And that's pretty core to what we want to do.
Okay, so swinging this round, then you were a little you sort of nailed your colours to the mast when you were talking about some of the new product that's coming out.
Yeah.
How do you maintain excitement, enthusiasm, and something interesting to say about that if you are not so interested in it, or less interested?
It's not all new product, is it? I mean, I made a particular reference to plug-in crossover SUV. I mean, for me, I like cars who know what they're for. And cars that just try to do everything not terribly well are just, and everybody's different. That doesn't get me excited. Any number of new cars out there today that's, and pure EVs, that I can get more than excited about. And again, one of the great liberating things about what we do is we don't have to cover everything. We can be really selective. And if you look back at the cars that we do review, and there aren't that many of them, they're all just interesting cars. We're not on the hamster wheel. We don't think, oh gosh, somebody's just launched a such and such another amorphous blob with 3 different engines in it. We better go and review that. We just don't have to play that game, because at the back of our minds, there aren't advertisers who are, and there isn't an advertising department saying you've got to review this because otherwise Fred won't advertise with us. We just don't do that. So really, and I do mean this, the only criteria we have for a story fit for the intercooler is that it's interesting, and possibly also that it tells you something that you didn't already know. That's a component of being interesting to me. And then we've even started to do the old story, which isn't really about cars, although 95% of our content will always be automotive. We just want to be a place where people go to really read really great stories written by really great writers. And we think that if we pour all our attention into the product, then they will come. We think that once there's a website as well, which will make life, and the whole business of sharing and everything else, massively easier, they'll do us even more.
And Dan, what about you? How do you keep motivated, interested, excited?
I'm perhaps a little bit more sanguine than others on this call about the future. Well, do you know what? The truth is, I actually don't know where we're heading. The truth is, Ferrari are going to launch a mid-engine hybrid supercar with best part of 800 horsepower this year. I think that's fairly exciting. So there's plenty of stuff coming through that really does light a fire. But I spend a lot of time thinking 5-10 years down the road, and what direction are we heading? And it seems to me at the moment that everyday driving and hobby driving will diverge. As we'll probably have electric cars every day, and something fun back in the shed at home for the weekends, which is, that's great. I can see that working. I can see that working for me. But I do wonder about that convergence of sports car, supercar, and electric. Is it possible that a car powered by batteries and electric motors that's designed to be thrilling to drive, can such a thing exist? And I have a lot of conversations with people who reassure me in quite sophisticated ways that it can be done. For instance, David Tuig, who is one of our writers and a brilliant guy. He's an automotive engineer who's got background in sports cars, who's got background in electric cars, and he's absolutely adamant that it can be done. And so I suppose I'm not exactly excited about this future generation of electric sports cars and supercars, but I'm enormously curious about them. No one has actually really built an electric sports car that's affordable. And so until someone does, we don't know what it's going to be like to drive. So I'm really curious about them. And I actually can't wait until who's it going to be, Alpine or Lotus or Porsche, or someone builds one. I can't wait to have a go, because if it's fun to drive, genuinely fun to drive the way a great petrol car can be, all of a sudden the future of automotive looks a whole lot rosier.
Do you think this is generational? Do you think the early 20s generation today think the same way, because maybe they've not had the same experiences of well, actually you don't look that old, Dan, to be honest, but you know, for the rest of
I am.
us, I'm definitely you know, it's hard to move on, isn't it, to the changing technology, and I'm not
Yeah.
so sure the younger generation see it in the same way.
Do you know, it's funny you say that though, because my kids fight. I mean, I think I might have told you this before, Darren, and it's not, sorry if I offend anybody by saying this, but my kids fight over who is going to inherit which of my cars, because they love them. They absolutely love them. So, and you know that they're both under 20 and they're just starting on their automotive journey now, but they love the old.
But they've been
Turn on.
brought up in a
They
household
have, I suppose.
who that are interested in cars in the way that you are, you know, and have seen the cars, and that's not true for most households.
That's true.
So,
Good point.
so I don't know what the answer is, to be honest, but I just get the feeling the younger generation may look at this a bit differently.
Well, I'm still
I get
waiting for the
the feeling-
exciting electric crossover SUV to come out, but Darren, you know why that is.
Yes.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. I get the feeling, and Amanda, you may have a view on this, but I think that young people are actually getting into old cars in a way that my generation didn't so much. There is apparently a huge interest among young people who are looking at cars from not even just the sort of 70s and 80s, but 50s, 60s, even pre-war. And I'm curious as to why that might be, and it may be that these are the petrol heads who are not finding modern product as entertaining or as interesting or as captivating as we did when we were their age. I don't know, and I don't think there are huge numbers of them, but we have one of the things that we do, which is very close to our hearts, is we always have a young writer as part of our team. And we're on our third now. What happens is we get a young writer, and then some big publishing house comes and nicks them, which from our point of view is job done, because that means they've got themselves a proper job in the industry, which we'd never be able to provide. And we've been able to give them a little bit of airtime, which has got them noticed, and then they're set, which is fantastic. And we did it because, certainly when I started this, there was no one doing that for us. And so we recently had a competition to find our latest one. And we thought we'd probably get, I don't know, 7 or 8 entries. I think we had over 50 in the end. And it was very interesting reading what they were writing about. And they weren't writing about the latest crossover SUV, plug-in hybrid, what's it. They were writing about stuff that interests all of us. A lot of it pretty old stuff. And you kind of wonder where, and everybody who entered had to be 21 or younger. And they've got it from somewhere. And the passion. There's no shortage of that out there. It may be that there aren't quite as many of them now as there were, because there's so much other stuff in their lives, isn't it? When we grew up with internets and all these other distractions, cars were quite an obvious thing to latch onto. That's not the case anymore. But there's no shortage of talent, and there's no shortage of passion, I don't think, among the young of today. And I just hope that they are able to be as lucky as we have been to be able to indulge that passion for as long as they're driving cars.
So what advice would you both give to young people who want to follow a career path similar to yours? What would you say to them?
Keep an eye out on our Instagram. Probably not anytime soon, but we ran our young writer competition for the first time late last year, and we're going to do it again. We'll do it again. And I mean, there have been similar things in the past, and there are similar things ongoing. So, anyone who's serious about a career in this line of work should just enter all these competitions. Ours is one of them. But I suppose the point about what we do is that the winner will write for us. They'll become one of our team of writers, and they will contribute, and they'll have our input. We won't publish anything that doesn't meet our standards, so we'll work with them and help them improve. But otherwise, it's just write, read. And it's actually a very interesting question, because it's been happening a lot of young people send me some stuff they've written and say, can you give me some feedback on this, please? And what I find interesting is that most of them write opinion pieces, or a lot of them do. And the truth is, an opinion piece is the hardest thing to write. So what I say to all of them is just go and do some reading, pick a car that you like, pick a car that's fascinated you forever, and dig and dig and dig and dig until you find a nugget, something that you find interesting that you didn't know before and that you suspect other people didn't know before. And then just write a really thoroughly researched story about that car. That's how a young person can deliver a really good piece of car journalism that we might publish. You know, we're probably not going to take an opinion piece from a 20-year-old.
But it's hard for them to have
I
an
know
opinion.
when I was 20, I wouldn't have stood a chance of writing a good opinion piece.
But Dan is right. Generally speaking, you know, any advice, well, the advice I give to anybody trying to get going, well, I mean, there are a few bits of advice. I mean, don't expect to get rich, because, you know, unless you're on the telly, very few do. So it really is a labor of love. If you are passionate about it and you can get into it, it is nevertheless one of the best jobs in the world. But there is no shortcut to writing. I mean, lots of people can drive to the required standard. You need to be a good driver. You need to be able to assess cars too. You need to be able to, excuse me, understand what cars are saying to you. But, you know, you don't have to be Lewis. You really don't. But you do have to be able to write. If you're going to have a good career, and by that I mean you don't earn your career writing, you know, press releases for windscreen wiper manufacturers. If you want to be out there driving new cars, making verdicts, you know, making a difference, I guess, you have to be able to write, and there is no substitute. I mean, even people who've been doing it for a long time, like me, you know, I didn't come into this industry knowing how to do it. I had to learn. I had to learn the hard way. And, you know, so get published. It doesn't matter what you're published in. Go and do work experience on magazines. You know, they're all, you know, websites. They're all looking for people who are prepared to give a week free of charge, because why wouldn't they? Work hard, arrive early, leave late, get yourself noticed, be creative, be proactive. I mean, it's all basic stuff, but so many people don't do it. So, and it's actually, to the right sort of person with the right sort of motivation and the right kinds of talent, I still don't think it's that difficult to get noticed. And then, you know, then you can do it. But you've got to really, really want it. And it's not all...
I've got a burning question following on from what you're saying then, which is, there's been a huge rise in social media influencers and a number who are specializing in automotive. So they say that they are, who are effectively writing articles, actually not writing any words, but are just videoing themselves, reviewing cars and posting their stuff, and off it goes. You know, how do you feel about that, you know, compared to the well-seasoned writer who's digging and digging and digging and finding the nugget?
There are some great guys and girls out there doing it to a good standard. The thing that I would say, you know, if you want to learn to really communicate about cars, if you want to learn to really assess a car, if you want to improve your knowledge of the industry, you've got to work side by side with people who have been doing it for decades. You just got to do that. You know, you learn more sitting in some new sports car alongside a very experienced, well-established journalist on some Welsh moorland road. You learn more in those 20 minutes about how to drive, how to assess a car, how to describe a car, than you will ever learn in 5 years doing it on your own. It's so important to work with people who have been doing it well to a high standard for a long time.
Do you think it's going to get more and more difficult for people to actually be able to assess cars as more and more cars become so standardized, so shared components, so vanilla? So, you know, they're all good. None of them are outstanding.
I don't think it will happen. I think it is happening. You know, I sit and I think of the car of the year, Jerry, and you know, and so, you know, the Intercooler tends to, well, we only tend to write about interesting cars, but you know, the car of the year, because it's a consumer award, we have to drive everything.
I can already guess which one hasn't won.
Well, I mean, there are 61 jurors, but also, you know, you put a different hat on when you're doing that, because it's not, you know, the criteria is not which car's most fun to drive. It's which car is best at doing the job for which it was designed, and that might be a very, very different job to the sort of, you know, thing that would interest me in a car. But we do still have to go off and drive all these things, and they are getting, vanilla is absolutely the word. You know, because they basically all have, you know, the same motor, for want of, it's an electric motor is an electric motor, a battery is a battery, a single speed transmission is a single speed transmission. So it's becoming ever more difficult to put those key distinctions in. And so what people are doing, because there's very little you can do on the engineering side, is they're putting all their resources into the design side. So you get cars with much more interesting interiors these days. Not sure they necessarily work any better, but you get these cars with these huge flat screens, which can, you can have your instruments in front of you, but your passenger can have an aquarium in front of that or whatever. There's lots of creative stuff going on there. But in terms of what cars are like to drive, yeah, it's much more difficult. And this, as I said, it's happening right now. And it does worry me. And, this isn't going to be a problem which is going to trouble me because, I'm nearer the exit door of my career than the entry point. But for the very young motoring journalists today who are still going to be wanting to earn a living out of assessing cars in, 30, 40 years time, yeah, it's going to be tricky.
So what are the cars that you're both most looking forward to coming out and actually having the opportunity to review in the coming year? Dan, we'll start with you.
Plenty. Lotus Emira.
Mm-hmm.
We had this conversation on our podcast, and we think there's a chance, never say never, but we think there's a chance it could be the last great driver's sports car, because no one's going to develop a new combustion engine sports car from now, because you won't be able to sell it for more than 8 years in the UK. It's just not going to happen. And then everything will be hybrid or electric after that, and we know what the implications of that are. So that's a significant car. Also, the McLaren Arthur. Actually, it's the Artura, isn't it? But it's their hybrid one. We should have been driving that a while ago now. It's been heavily delayed, that thing. So I hope they manage to get on top of the issues, and I hope it's a brilliant thing to drive. I'm very curious to see.
And Andrew, what about you?
The Ferrari 296 GTB. Mm-hmm. When I drove the SF90, I came away thinking not really being able to understand who the car was for, because it's this 1,000 horsepower, near 1,000 horsepower hypercar, but they're not limiting its production. So it's not like a specialist thing, and that assures its value. But because it's got a driven front axle, there's no space for anything at all. There's no luggage space at all, so you can't actually go anywhere in it. And I can remember just saying, if they just took away that electric driven front axle, they'd still be left with an 800 horsepower rear wheel drive car, which you could actually use. And that's what the 296 GTB is. And that fascinates me, because I think that could be, I don't know, you must never prejudge these things, but if Ferrari have got it right, and they rarely get these things wrong, that could be an extraordinary car. I mean, that could be like sort of peak supercar. And I'm very excited about driving it, although annoyingly enough, Dan's going to go and drive it for us. So I'll have to wait until it comes over here.
Do you pull straws for who gets to drive what, or is it just availability? Or
it's really availability, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, we turn down 99% of the stuff that comes into us because, we're, apart from being motoring journalists, we're actually trying to run a business, which neither of us have done before. So it kind of, it keeps us grounded most of the time. But something like that comes in, and obviously, we're not going to say no to that. And so Dan where are you going? Spain to drive that, I think?
I think so. Yeah, not looked into it, actually.
Oh, is that coming up soon? Sounds lovely.
March?
I can't remember. It's next month, yeah. But it's, you say, where are you going? I'm going to Heathrow. That's all you need. And then you land somewhere and drive the car and then come home.
Because Andrew, you also drove the Gordon Murray T33 recently, didn't you?
No, I went to look at it. Nobody drove. No.
You didn't get to sit in it.
No, it's there isn't one you can sit in. There's only a model.
Apologies.
So I went and stood in an underground car park with Gordon for a couple of hours and spoke to him about it. I can't wait to drive it. Or the T50.
Is it the T50? Have you driven that?
No, I think Dario is the only person I know who's driven that, because they've not done any press drives in that. Although hopefully, keeping everything crossed, we'll find a way into that before the end of the year. But no, I mean the T33 is just a really interesting thing. And I just love the way that the Gordon's mind works. Everybody else is thinking about, we've got to downsize, fewer cylinders, more turbochargers, plug in this, electric that. And Gordon's going, we'll just do a manual V12. And I just, there's a sort of refreshing traditionalism about that which appeals to me.
There is. Well, he's a phenomenal mind. I remember talking to him about that. What was it? That pickup truck thing he did, that flat pack box.
For the Ox, yes.
That's right. Yes, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating listening to how he went through the problem solving of all of that.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, I mean, not wishing to dwell on the negatives here, but you just said you're sort of further to the exit of your career than you are at the beginning.
I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's yes. I mean, I'm what I'm. Yes, I mean, I've been a motoring journalist for 34 years. In 34 years, I will be. What will I be in 34 years' time? I'll be 90.
Yes.
So I think it's unlikely
Safe
still to be. Frankly, I'll be happy to be respiring at 90, but I'm unlikely to be drawing an income from the industry then. But yeah.
Well, with so much experience, are you still finding those nuggets that you talk about, the new things to talk about that you didn't know?
There's always something interesting. It just depends how hard you dig. History isn't a finite thing. It keeps on being made. What we're talking about today is good. And no, you just keep on digging. One of the things that some people said to us when we started talking about doing the intercooler was, well, you're just going to run out of stuff to write about. And honestly, it's the one thing which has never ever worried me. We're never going to get to the stage where there are no more good stories to tell. And even if Dan and I ran out of good stories to tell, we've got such an amazing bunch of people working for us that between us, it's never ever going to happen. They're always going to be good, and there'll be good news stories to tell. It's not just gazing into the past thinking things aren't what they used to be. It's a constantly evolving thing.
Dan, sorry, so Darren, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because no one had asked me, so I'll just say it anyway, is if I was given the opportunity to look at some cars this year, surprisingly, I'd be quite keen to see what the Tesla Roadster's like, if that ever appears, because I've always been a critique of Tesla design. I'm not a big fan of them, but I think that looks reasonably nice, and it's a Roadster and a type of sports car. I think maybe that might tick the boxes, but that's why I'd like to give it a go to see if they actually got it right on the on the sports car.
I'd like to know what all that power feels like, all that acceleration.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does feel to me that this is the issue that I have with electric performance cars, is that it seems they have one trick at the moment, which is to be really, 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 really fast, and you just can't use that on the road. So yeah.
The interesting route for the electric sports car is, and I can see companies like Caterham and Ariel doing this, because the moment it becomes a pure recreation is the moment you don't need the range anymore. And that's the critical thing. And if you don't need the range, you don't have to have a big battery. And if you don't have to have a big battery, you can have a light car. So you could have a Caterham weighing, Caterhams today weigh 500-600 kilos. You could have one which may weigh 800-900 kilos, but would still be ridiculously light compared to anything else, which had a range of 130-140 miles. And that could still be a very special car. I think it gets really problematic when you start down the road of creating great drivers' cars that can do distances, because with the EV, what we do know is that if you want to do a distance, you have to have the weight. And until some miraculous breakthrough in the technology comes along, and goodness knows, I've been waiting for solid state batteries to happen, for almost as long as I've been doing this job. And the thing about solid state batteries, which is the great breakthrough technologies, they're always about 10 years away. Doesn't matter when you ask the question. 20 years ago, they were 10 years away, and they're still about 10 years away. So, I can't see that happening. And they do get better, but, for car manufacturers like, big luxury companies, Bentley and Rolls-Royce, they'll have a wonderful time with EVs. Because what do you want from a luxury car? You want torque and you want silence. Well, that's an EV, isn't it? And right down at the other, little sports cars, I think they'll be fine. It's all the stuff in the middle. It's all the stuff. And it's the electric 911 that I just can't get my head around.
Oh, don't mention Porsche.
Don't mention Porsches. Dan, you were one of the first journalists, I believe, to drive the new Rimac Concept 1. What was that like?
Yeah, so this was a few years ago. This is the one before the latest car, the Nevera. So it's a really interesting thing. And what's clever about the Rimac and certain other electric cars, new Lotus Evija being another, is that they have one motor per wheel. And so you can do this all-wheel torque vectoring thing, which is way more precise and responsive than the kind of all-wheel torque vectoring you can do with a combustion engine car. And so they can actually make the car behave in really unusual ways. They can make it feel a lot lighter than it is. They can make it pivot on a dime. You can technically make it do that army tank thing where it just spins on the spot. And so
it's always useful, that.
It's extremely useful. And so you find yourself driving this car and you're thinking, this behaves unlike anything else I've ever driven before. It's really interesting. The car that I drove was very limited on range, so it's difficult to get beneath the skin of that car. Also, you see these headline power figures: 1,000 horsepower, 2,000 horsepower. They don't feel it. You're not suddenly thinking this feels twice as accelerative as a 911 turbo. They feel about 911 turbo fast to me. So they're curious. They're curious things, but this idea of all-wheel torque vectoring is very interesting to me. It's inherently heavy, inherently complicated. But there are companies working on exactly that theory now, and they'll make cars do extraordinary things. And I am quite excited by that stuff.
Andrew, picking up on the point you made just about sort of big SUVs and big luxury cars. So what's your view? I'm also thinking about what you're talking about, screens as well, and driver and passenger. I mean, obviously with big companies like Mercedes now going on their sort of EQ, and I'm thinking particularly of the EQS.
Yeah.
What's your view on something like that?
Well, I haven't driven an EQS yet. I think the one I was going to drive got damaged, and so it's coming.
Well, that might have been me. Sorry.
I'm sure it wasn't. And it's meant to have this hyperscreen in it. So I'm looking forward to trying it. I mean, the sad thing, and this says everything about me really, and not very much about the cars I'm talking about, but these days, the criteria I apply to cars, first and foremost, is how little do they annoy me, which is really sad. Well, you will know this, won't you? You'll get
you
into
are
a car.
sounding like a grumpy old man. You know that.
Well, yeah, and there's a good reason for that. You get into cars and they start binging and bonging at you almost before you got your seatbelt on. You then head off down the road and it's telling you that you're too close to the car in front, or there's a car coming up behind you, and then you try and go around a corner and it doesn't like the line you're taking, so it decides it's going to do one that it wants to do. And so all this stuff, which they call driver assistance or driver aids or whatever, I just wish cars would leave me alone a bit more. And all the sort of stuff that you're talking about, it all looks amazing, but it's the balance, isn't it, between form and function? Ultimately, how well does it actually work? And if you've got to dive through 3 submenus just to turn your bum warmer on, or to turn the radio up, or whatever, then that's from the priorities aren't around the right way, are they? You should be. And if you spend more time looking at a screen than the road, all these safety systems are meant to make you safe, but they never measure how much more likely you are to have an accident because you're staring at a screen trying to figure out how it works, or you're trying to stab little icons with your finger. And who knows? And clearly, people do crash cars as a result of that, which would never have happened if there was just a button which you could press.
Well, they're now giving it to you as heads-up display, aren't they? So they're even more distracting you.
Yeah, and I do sound like a grumpy old man, and I'm being briefly serious. I don't think I am. I just like stuff that works.
Yeah.
And if this stuff was that beautiful and it worked really, really well, so it was intuitive and it was easy and functional, and it actually allowed me to spend more time thinking about what I should be doing, which is driving the car, then bring it on. No one would be happier for me than me to see these systems work as well as they look. I just haven't come across one yet.
Now, I'm conscious that we are marching on with time here, so I'm going to try and get through some of my last questions quite quickly. Andrew, I understand, apparently, you are a former and current Guinness World Record holder.
Yeah, ish. No, I am.
Share.
Okay, so the former one was, the former one is a complete cheat because I wanted to, I'll be quick. I wanted to break a Guinness record. I didn't want to set one But when I first became a motoring journalist, I happened to pick up a telephone one day, and on the other end of it was a bloke called Donald McFarlane, who was the editor of the Guinness Book of Records, and he wanted someone to edit their motoring pages. So it was my first ever freelance gig, and I got paid 50 quid for it. That allowed me to suggest ideas, and I suggested the fastest lap of a UK circuit by a production car. I then got my boss, who was a bloke called Howard Lees, who has sadly died, to go and set it in a Ferrari Testarossa, knowing that the next year that car was going to be replaced by a much quicker car, so I could go and break it. So I broke a record that I not only set but invented. So yes, I very briefly held the record for the fastest lap of a UK circuit by a production car, which I did by driving around Millbrook, which, as you all know, is a constant bowl, at 175, I think, in a 512 TR Ferrari. And then it got beaten again almost immediately. And the other one, the current one, is, what did I do? Largest number of countries you could drive through on a single tank of fuel. There you go.
Say that again. Largest number
for a country you can drive through on a single tank of fuel.
And how many was it? And where did you go? And what car were you in?
I was in an Audi A6 diesel. We basically, well, I can't even remember. So it was something like France, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Slovenia, Bosnia.
I bet you wish you hadn't asked.
Serbia, and we ended up in Hungary. So I think there were 14 or 15 countries.
That's quite a list for someone who said they couldn't remember.
Yeah, that's actually quite impressive. Do you
Very
get
impressive.
or like a certificate, or do you get a medal?
Yes,
or a certificate?
yes. My downstairs loo is adorned with that very piece of paper. Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievably dull. It was so because we had to do it non-stop because we didn't want the engine getting cold or anything. So we literally just blitzed it. And I can't remember how long it took, about, I don't know, 27 hours or something, and it was just duller than dull.
Wow.
I mean, it was a job. It was done with the RAC, who wanted a record they could make a noise about. So, and I used to write some stuff, so they asked me to do it, and yeah, fine. Terrific.
Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. It's not terribly heroic, is it?
Well, no. Well, I'm not going to answer that. Dan, any notable records or achievements for you?
None spring to mind. I was the first journalist to drive a Rimac, you know, and I think that might feel more significant in 20 years than it does today.
And more significant than Andrew's 14 countries. Or was it 15?
It's cooler than that.
Yeah. I'm not judging. Okay, so give us just a quick lowdown. Obviously, you've got the website for the Intercooler coming. Any dates on that? Do we know when that's going to be?
It's a couple of months away still. We're looking at springtime. We're making sure we get it right rather than get it live in a hurry. But yeah, I mean, it'll be at theintercooler.co.uk. And in the meantime, we're still doing lots of stuff on Instagram at the Intercooler, and the podcast every week. So there's enough to keep us busy, that's for sure.
And any further steps or any future plans that you can enlighten us on? Anything to look forward to?
I hope not.
You hope not?
Well, only because our plates are so full at the moment. Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff that we'd like to do. It'd be nice to do. Well, I say that now. Actually, what we are going to do, we are going to do more events. We had our first track day last year, which we did at Thruxton, which was a wonderful day out. And we were incredibly lucky because Karen Chandok, who's one of our team, came down and spent the day scaring our punters witless. Henry Pearman turned up with some Group C cars, and so people could watch that lot going around, which was unbelievable. And there wasn't a red flag all day. It was amazing. So we had a wonderful time, and people were very kind about it. So we're going to do some more of that.
That sounds amazing.
And we might do. We'll probably go off and do, Bicester Heritage Sunday scrambles and do just sort of things where we can just meet up with people who are kind enough to give us their money, because it's fun.
Indeed it is. In fact, I'm a big fan of the scramble. I love it. Great event. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. And Darren and I'm speaking on your behalf, Darren. We're wishing you all the very best for the future.
Thank you so much.
Back me up on that, Darren.
Yeah, we're very excited to be working with the Intercooler, and definitely the quality of the output and the writing is exceptional. I do agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just finally, and I know I would say this because I'm on this podcast, but support of JBR has been fantastic. It really has, and continue.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to drag that back very quickly because we call ourselves Fund Your Passion, and actually, Darren, that is what you're all about, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much what we're all about. We are here to support the enthusiasts who are passionate about cars, and that may be a car that costs £25,000 or a car that costs over £1 million, and it doesn't really matter. It's about the passion and the enthusiasm and experience that people have with those cars, and trying to bring that to life for them and help them on that journey, whether they're aspirational or perspirational at the other end, going around the track. So that's why we exist. That's what we enjoy, and we love to hear all the stories from our customers about their cars and experiences that perhaps these guys like to write about.
Great stuff. Well, listen, Dan and Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure and lovely to hear about what you've been up to. Thank you, and best of luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.